Community of Practice authors engagement session. This evening we have, or if you're in Taiwan, we're in the evening. If you're where Umar is, good afternoon, good morning to anybody joining from across the water. Yeah, we're welcoming Umar Sheraz to discuss with us his recent and excellent work with Pak Afghan Youth Futures. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Umar. We're all I think everyone is familiar with you and familiar with your work, your extensive work in the area. So please start us off, and I'm sure we'll get a great discussion going, and people can pop their questions into the chat, and we'll answer them as they come up, right?
Okay. Hello, everybody. So good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good midnight, wherever you are in this beautiful world of ours. That is the beauty of Zoom, brings people together from different places. And, it's always fun to, talk with people from different, time zones and different geographies. So today I'll be talking about my work over the last decade or so with Afghan youth. And in a way, it reflects my own work. I mean, I was introduced to the work of, to the world of foresight about 13 years ago by Dr. Suhail and Ayatollah. And I would call it a mistake. It was it was being at the right place at the very wrong time, actually. And it all came together. And yeah, I mean, we were supposed to have a course at the place where I was working called Conflict Secretariat. And the guy who was supposed to come, he changed track at the last minute. And I must tell you that, the gentleman who was supposed to actually give that foresight course, he had given us a really thick book on foresight and was looking at pouring through it. I was like, wow, that's such a lot of things to digest. This is going to be a really boring session. And these used to happen over 2 weeks, by the way. And then at the last moment, somebody said, okay, if that gentleman is not coming, here's another gentleman. His name is Suhail Ayatollah, and he's, you can come over and, he'll, do some work in Pakistan. So we invited him over. So I remember Suhail coming over, and I just saw this gentleman wearing a sweatshirt and a jeans and a bag on his back. And I was like, wow. So this guy's going to talk to us about foresight. I was like, wow. But when he started, wow, that was a life-changing experience. As they say, life has not been the same again. So yeah, it was an amazing experience. And then I got to work with, got my first breaks with him. I was very thankful to Suhail and Ayatollah that he took me across places as well. He helped me as much as I could. And so my first work, now today I'm going to talk about my work with Afghan youth. So I'll start off with something, those were the early days of my work in foresight. So one of the first things which I ever did was there was this pro-poor scenario making competition, which was hosted by the Institute of Alternative Futures, and the Rockefeller Foundation were funding it. Now that was my first ever assignment into the world of scenario building and futures. So what they were asking was they were asking people across the world to come up with some pro-poor scenarios for the people whose voice we do not hear about. So I am, by the way, a mining engineer by training, and I was looking at the Afghanistan mineral scenario with a lot of interest. And I said, okay, wonderful. This looks great. Let's look at some pro-poor aspects of this. So hang on a second. If I could just share, Edward, could you just allow me to share? Yeah, okay. Let me just share my, where's my, yeah, okay. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. So this was something, now it used to be at the Institute of Alternative Futures. They used to have a website. Now that website is down. But at that time, they held that pro-poor scenarios competition. And I got second prize in that because I was looking at mineral extraction and pro-poor futures in Afghanistan. This, by the way, is on web.archive.org. If anybody is interested in looking at those scenarios, we had some wonderful scenarios from people from other parts of the world as well. So remember Heather Frey from Hawaii, she was there as well. My other friends from South Africa, from Pakistan, other people whom I've been meeting through the years, they also presented that work. And that was a wonderful place actually to start. And I could actually share this link with you if you're interested in, because the original website, it is down. And yeah, you could have a look at some of my work over there. So that was my first foray. And there's a reason I mentioned mineral extraction, because this has been a consistent theme through about 1 decade of my work with Afghan youth. Mineral extraction comes up in almost every discussion that I have, because Afghanistan is a landlocked country, very poor, devastated by war and conflict for more than 3 decades now. So the minerals which were discovered there in the last decade, they bring a lot of hope to that country, and to the youth, that maybe this will bring them out from their poverty, and maybe reduce conflict. So that's something which we'll look at with a lot of interest, and that's something which I will be, some of which I will be discussing today as well. Okay, let's move on to my presentation. Hang on a second. Hang on a second. Let me get to the top. There we go. Okay. Edward, you need to tell me if you can see the screen or not. All right. Can you see what I'm sharing? The full screen, Edward?
Yes, yes. If you just put it, or if you expand it, maximize it in your own screen. There we go.
Is
Perfect.
is it okay now? All right. Okay.
Yep.
So this is where it started. So this global proper scenario competition. What happened next was that because I was doing this work, there were people who noticed this work and they invited me for the first time. Now, this is about in 2014. There is this campus of the University of Peshawar. It's called the Bada Gali campus. It's right there in the mountains, very beautiful, picturesque place. They've got a great campus, with acres and acres of land. Would invite all of you to, if you can ever go there. It's a wonderful place. So it was over here that I did my first workshop with Afghan youth, and there were lots of people from Pakistan as well, but that was my first interaction with them. And we over 4 years, every year I used to go there and used to hold one whole day of workshops with them, and we used to work on different themes, explore different aspects about the future, and it was really fun. Uh, so what I'm going to do now is the way I'm going to present now is my evolution as a future. How is that is linked with the work which I've done with the Afghan youth? That might be interesting for all of you as futurists. So one thing which I played, which was very new for me at that time, was the Pollock game. Sohail and Atul had just infected me with a foresight bug, and I'd come to know about the Pollock game. So I went there and I said, okay, let's play the Pollock game, guys. So I remember this is a theme which has been very consistent through all my work, and working with the Afghan and Pak and Afghan youth. And so when I used to ask them, what do you think about the future of Afghanistan? Is it bright or is it bleak? Most of the time, it used to be something like, we feel that the future is bleak. And it's like, why do you say so? So there used to be different reasons. One reason which many of them said was that, for example, one person, he said that I have a football field just outside my home, but there are mines in that football field. If I can't play football right outside my home, how do I expect there's going to be a very rosy future later? There were lots of women in that room from Afghanistan, and one of the things which they expressed was that they have a serious issues when they go to university. There's lots of cultural issues, social issues. The parents are always asking, "Beta, is everything okay? You've reached university, okay? Has there been an incident?" So we're really worried about what's going to happen when when we graduate. And a very common theme for all of them was, we don't know who's in charge. Is it the NATO, the USA, ISI, the Taliban? Who's in charge of our country? So we really are worried about our country, okay? But then when I used to ask them about, all right, you think, can you influence the future, or do you think the grander forces will play? This is something, again, which has been, I've always impressed me about the resilience of, the Afghan people, is they always used to say unanimously, we think we can influence the future. We've been fighting these wars for about 2 generations now, for more than 3 decades now. We need to think that we can influence the future, because if we can't, hope is the only thing that we have. If that is the way, then there is no point of all these meetings and all. We want to hope that we can influence the future. For me, that was a great experience, because I was, experimenting with the Pollock game for the first time in my life, and it was an amazing experience, which I retell to my audiences again and again over the past decade. This is something which I did. So that was the ball game. Plus, we were very blessed. We had different people with different mindsets. We were talking on some amazing topics. For example, female empowerment. For example, at that time, that was a big topic, and there was a lot of, even within those rooms, there were a lot of polarization. There was a lot of tension even within those rooms. What next for the women? So, for example, there was this thing which we did. This was in 2015. If you can just notice over here, this was in 2015. This workshop which we did. So this group, they were doing something about, if you want to get, and they're using the futures triangle, that how can we have a women president in the office in Kabul, 15% women in the jobs, and lots of economic growth. Now, if you look over here, one of the things which was which was there, which still exists today, was, as the past was, what's called the cultural barriers. That was a big time issue for all of them, and there used to be a lot of debates and lots of polarization even in that room. And not just polarization. So, for example, there used to be people in this room who used to say that we're fine with as long as there is female empowerment, but at the same time, we're worried about what's called the way it's being shoved down our throats, and the way it's been our universities, the way sometimes even merit is being disowned, and women are getting the higher jobs just because they're a women. And we are worried about this. Is this sustainable? When the Americans go away, when the NATO forces go away, what is going to happen then? So even at that time, there was a lot of tension even with those rooms, a lot of polarization there. But as futurists, this is something which enriches our work. I encourage such dialogues, and think again was, we need to bring out these silent voices as well. We're not just here to, I mean, as a futurist, I've always considered my work to be that of a dignified babysitter. Okay. My thing is that I need to be a facilitator of that dialogue. What do we do next? All right. So very interesting dialogue. So, for example, one of the things which is a lot of contention between Pakistan and Afghanistan is the border. So that time we're looking at a 2x2 matrix, a double variable matrix. So we're looking at the interplay between a restricted border and a world in which there is almost no participation of men or women domination. So some really interesting work which we used to do at that time, and the thing at that time was there was a lot of excitement, lots of imagination at work, because future at that time, there was the limit. At the same time, there were also those voices who were talking a bit about caution and the need for things to be a bit more organic, and for Afghans to take control of their destiny. So, for example, this is something based on the work which I did with the Afghan youth. So, my topic, which I was still very interested in, still am interested to this day, is about mineral extraction in Afghanistan. And one thing for them always was, when are these foreign forces going to withdraw, so that we have autonomy, we can make decisions on our own. When does that happen? It's been 20 years. They say they've spent a lot of money. I mean, and the final bill which came out was, there was about $500 billion which were invested into Afghanistan. But again, the thing was, where is all that money going? Why isn't there no trickle down effect? Those are voices which are again and again, which were being voiced again and again. So again, things like rampant corruption or governance institutions, these things and all, they used to be part of a lot of discussions you used to have. So again, as the thing about scenarios, at that point in time, this seemed, I don't know if this actually happened or not, but then we actually saw this happen. That, there was the withdrawal of those foreign forces. Nobody, even in the wildest dream at that time, was talking about the return of the Taliban, but they did make a return. Okay. So a lot of that, so great times which we had at that time. So I look at that as my first phase of working with the Afghan youth. That was till 2018. All right. After that, there was a lot of, all these, there was the change of government. There was the Taliban then took over. And after that, my next meeting with them was in what's called the Pak Afghan Youth Forum. Again, the thing was, now we're looking at most of these youth that you're seeing over here were actually migrants who had come over due to the exodus from Afghanistan. So almost all of these kids that you see over here were kids who were just now studying in Pakistan at that time. And this was a time of great, stress for them, a time of great depression, because they were uncertain about their future, what's going to happen. We've just moved out of our country where that is because the only country which we knew. We have moved out of a country. What happens next? So that at that time was, a question about them. Lots of soul searching, the thing which we used at that time, and not much interested in future scenarios at that time. That was the least of their worries. They were more about what is going to happen about my immediate well-being, what is going to happen to our families, what about their welfare. But some very interesting things which happened that time. For example, when they came over to Pakistan, they tasted mangoes. And this, by the way, if anybody is right now in Pakistan, we have a lots of mangoes right now in Pakistan. Uh, so that was a big question which they asked, was that could we have mangoes instead of poppy fields in Afghanistan? That was a scenario which they used to imagine. That scenario actually got realized about 2 years ago. 2 years later, the Taliban, for example, they have banned all poppy work and poppy crop and all. They're now moving towards other crops, and they want to move towards cash crops. They want to move towards crops when they can earn revenue and all. So this is something which happened that time. Okay, this is my last workshop which I did with the Afghan youth. That was in last year, but this also marked a remarkable change in the way I was looking at foresight. So, for example, one of the things which started happening over the past after COVID was I got a lot of influence from the climate change movement. I mean, before COVID, I knew about climate change as a futurist, but I never knew the dynamics of it all. Then I got a bit more involved, and then got a lot of methods and tools which I came in, and lots of philosophies which came in from the climate change uh, you know uh, uh, movement which is happening in the world, and that influenced a lot of my work. So what has happened now over the past 2 3 years is I don't go in as, this is what I think is going to happen. What I now ask people is, you're the ancestors of tomorrow. What do you think is going to happen to your future generations? All right. So, for example, the Pollock game. I just talked to you about the Pollock game and how, but now I play the Pollock game in a very different way now. Over the past 2 years, what I do is before that, right at the very beginning of my workshops, I play something which is called the time traveler game. So I imagine all those people that imagine a child whom you love, a nephew, niece, a neighbor's, child, somebody whom you love. Let's explore the future of that particular child. All right. According to the theme for which we're working on. So if you've been in Suhail and Ayatullah's workshops, there's something which is us right at the end. We ask you to close your eyes and meditate and, takes you on a time travel journey. I try to do this very early in my workshop. So right at the beginning, let's do this time travel thing. Let's imagine the future for this child, for this particular theme. So, and when they're done with this, we then what I just asked for you, all right, you imagine the future. What would you think was the future like? Was there a bright future for that child? Or is there going to be a bleak future for the future generation? For whatever topic you're talking about. So let's say whether it's glacier futures, climate change, they're looking at, so last week I was looking at, trade and customs. So ask them, all right, trade and customs, you guys have a very important role. What do you think is the future generation for our generation? They could then imagine that. I found this method, this change to be very organic and very, very powerful. Because it's not that it's now you're looking at your own self. Instead of that, you're looking for somebody whom you care about today. You love a child today, you love somebody today. What is their future like? So when I've played this with the Afghan youth, I don't tend to be emotional, but I've actually seen people actually come out with tears in their eyes that, all right, this is for our generations. What do we do? And then our next question again is, all right, so this was the future. This is what you imagined. Now tell me, can you influence the future of your next generation? Or is the future of the next generation going to be influenced by the grander forces? And so people set themselves accordingly. I found to be this modified version of the Paula game to be much more powerful. People are, then they are emotionally attached to what was going to happen later on. And then whatever activity we do later on, whether it's the futures triangle, the wheel, whatever the scenarios we make, my thought is remember that child. Whatever you're doing it for that child. All right. How does the future look for you now, guys? All right. So another thing which I changed over the past 2 years is that, and this is something we have been noticing for quite some time, is that the people who are not well versed in English, then they have a serious disadvantage in these workshops. And even though I try to speak in Urdu, many of those concepts still are in English. They're westernized. It's a little hard for people to digest them and to respond to them. But what I found is that art is more universal. Art is something which, I mean, for example, a few years ago, I was working with entrepreneurs in Qatar. Their art, capabilities were just a notch above mine. But they would be, might look actually childish, but they conveyed very important, themes, very important, part sentiments, which were not, have been possible if they try to scribble them down in words. So the first thing which I usually ask them people to do now is that, all right, guys, let's try to benchmark where we are now. All right, let's not use the word benchmark. Let's say that, where are we now? Let's try to draw that. So for example, in this particular workshop, what we did was we asked them, all right, guys, what's happening now? So for example, they said, okay, there's a lot of terrorism happening. Women are not allowed to go to universities. Lots of people, they have to, be in the parda, and you have to be very careful. Lots of passport issues. Medical facilities are almost non-existent. Plus, industries and all not existent. And plus, they have a lot of climate change issues in Afghanistan. So, for example, last year when I was talking to the people there, they said that, it's a real injustice that one thing is we have been cut off from the world. Second thing is that our government was not allowed to come over, and, even the Taliban, they were not allowed to come over to the COP meetings. We have issues which are happening in Afghanistan. For example, one participant, he indicated that he was from the Paktia region. So he said before what used to happen was there used to be a lake, and in the winters, that lake used to be so much frozen, we could actually run jeeps over it. Now he says there's just a thin sliver of ice on top, thin sheet of ice on our, and the winters aren't as much cool as they used to be. Similarly, in the capital Kabul, because of the rampant, expansion and urbanization which happened in Kabul during the, the Nehru era. At that time, cities just grew up without proper planning. Now they have serious issues of water. So that is one issue which they're facing. So think we have serious climate change issues, but the world is not ready to listen to them. Where do we go? And plus, we have issues in the border. So this was something we said, okay, so this is where we are right now. Where do you want to go now? So in terms of scenarios, we should take them to, all right, this is where we want to go to from now onwards. So for example, they said, all right, how can we have, for example, they talk about quality of education. So if you actually look at this picture, so there is one side, there's actually there's a female, on the other side there is a male. So they're talking about equality of education. They talked about brotherhood, open borders, prosperity, development, themes which they want to. This is the world which we want to go to. And plus, this black thing which you see over here is actually the minerals. They're very hopeful that the minerals. Nothing happened in the last 1 decade, but hopefully now those minerals can actually bring peace and prosperity and some sort of revenue generation for our people. This again over here is another drawing which they came up with. Just for information, this is what's called the Murad Khan. Murad Khani was actually a neighborhood in Kabul. It was a place where there were lots of artisans. There was a lot of art which was flourishing there over centuries. I mean, Afghans, they have a long lineage coming back from, the Mughals and other people. And, so pottery, art, carpets, all of that used to happen in the Murad Khani neighborhood. That got, during the war, lots of that got dismantled, but some people were still, holding on to the mantle. That now is again in disarray. So for them, the ideal future for them was, what if can we imagine the Murad Khani neighborhood again, and where art flourishes, where again the artisans, they can have a proper livelihood. And again, the thing was, can Afghanistan become a transit for route for trade? So right now we don't have Afghans don't have much trade happening with Central Asia or with Pakistan, but can we have some sort of a train network in between? And the borders right now, those are very well guarded borders. We have lots of issues there. We would love to have more welcoming borders where we welcome each other. And this is really funny, really ironic. Uh, there are lots of Afghans even in my neighborhood. So when I talk to them, it's like if they want to go to cross a border, it's very easy. But if you want to go through officially through a passport, that takes a lot of time. So I talked to you about the participants in our workshops who used to come from Afghanistan. They used to complain that if we just had to walk through the border, that would have been so much easier. But when you go through the passport route and come through the airports and all, oh my goodness, that's such a hassle. And then when you come here, you have to get registered with the police and all. That's such a hassle. It would be better if we just walk across the border. So they again said, what if we have a welcoming border? So through using art. And finally, this thing about, how about a Pak Afghan school? Again, there is trade. Again, they talk about, these corridors where where there's trains moving through, and there is a lot of trade happening there. So that's the future which they would love to happen, which they would love. I mean, these people, they had some of them actually had kids, even who were just playing outside in the corridor, and they said like, we have gone through war, but for our kids, we want to imagine a future which is, peaceful, which is prosperous, and we don't have to go through all these dignities we're having now. We don't want to be migrants in another country. There's only one Afghanistan in the world. We wish to be back in our country. Okay, so so the way Edward and I, the way we talked was that, I'm going to just talk for about 20 odd minutes, and the rest of the time I would like to, have a discussion. This is my final slide, guys. So I actually have talked for 25 minutes. We hear a lot about Afghanistan. Unfortunately, most of that is not in a very, in a beautiful sense. It's usually in a very negative vibe. Uh, one of the things which I was gifted at during one of these events was the saffron. So you see this, what is in between? This is the saffron from Afghanistan. The saffron in Afghanistan is of world-class quality. It employs different people, the people who are the lowest rung of society. Lots of women are employed here in different, parts of, processing of saffron and then eventually selling it. Uh, this for me is always a reminder that there is so much more to Afghanistan than what we hear in the news. It's time we put the spotlight on these things as well. Thank you very much for creating a beautiful dialogue space and listening to me so patiently. Over to you guys. Thank you.
All right, Umar. Great discussion, great presentation. Thank you very much for that. With that, we'll open the discussion up. If anyone wants to be the first to jump in, either jump in now, turn on your audio, or give the hand raise feature here in the in Zoom, and we'll jump right to you.
Yeah, I would like to see some of those chats as well. I mean, 33 chats. Let's see what happens. So yeah,
All right,
sure. Please look forward to the questions. Yeah.
Yelena, please jump in. Go ahead.
Hi everyone, and Assalamu alaikum, Umar. Thank you for your
Walaikum
presentation.
assalam.
I was listening for and thinking about that work in 2014 and on in Afghanistan. And I was wondering, how did it happen that you came there? Who were your contacts that helped you to arrange that a workshop in the past, and who do you think might be helpful now to resume that work?
Okay, who was useful during my workshops?
Yeah, who helped you to arrange them first during the
Yeah.
first meeting? How you came across that group of people? You were invited, or whatever was that? What was the history?
Yeah. The thing was because I was working with futures and I was looking at some really crazy topics. So that invited the attention of some people. Suhail and Ayatollah once gave me a very good piece of advice. He said was that one thing is we go on and market ourselves that, hey, I do this. Would you be interested? It's like create some champions, people who can actually say, okay, here's this, guy who's doing some work. Would you be interested in working with him? Good thing was I was able to, I am very lucky that I have some of those champions who have had a look at my work and said, all right, I think this is useful. Thinking about the present is fine, but we also need to have an eye on the future. So many of those people then came to the fore. So for example, this the workshop series which I had in Badagali in the University of Peshawar, it was a pure coincidence. I went there for another presentation, and then I came to know that they were having this, this summer camp where they're bringing in students from Afghanistan and some students from the Peshawar University from the political sciences department. And I just asked them, all right, you're going to have different themes. I'm a futurist. This is the work which I do. They like the work. They liked my work on Afghan mineral futures because they thought that was a very different topic from the other participants as well. And they said, all right, let's try what you do. They love that work. And I've been involved with them ever since for more than a decade now. And that gave me the opportunity. Likewise, since I had done work before, so there were people over here, they had seen some of my work which was publishing in LinkedIn and other, social media places. They saw my work with Afghan youth and they really liked the way, the Pollock game, Futures Triangle, some really simple tools with which you can express a lot, and very powerful, by the way, very powerful tools which you can do, in a very short period of time. And they then helped me in doing this. Now, in terms of moving ahead with the future, again, it's those champions, but I do look at, for example, I would love to work with the diaspora who are in other parts of the world. There's lots of Afghan diaspora who are in other parts of the world. I would love to work with them. Second place where I see myself working is, okay, this is something which I wanted to come to right at the very end, but you asked a very good question, Yelena. So let me ask you. At the end of last year, I actually had an opportunity to work with a delegation of the media network of the Taliban. They were here in Pakistan on some other time, but I had a 1-hour conversation with them, and we talked about futures. Afghan futures came in them. Very lively, very great discussion which we had, and they were really liked it. So, for example, Jim Dater saying that anything useful about the future needs to look ridiculous. That really resonated with them. They were like, "Wow!" When I translated that to them, they were like, "Wow, this sticks in for the Taliban." 20 years ago, when people were, removing us from the Afghan, government, who would have thought that 20 years later would actually come back? That resonated with them. So then we talked about Afghan youth, the futures. I mean, for them, they would love to have dialogues and all as well. But thing for them one was many of the youth have actually just migrated. The TikTokers, the YouTubers, all those people have actually migrated. They love the concept of futures because they said that we have been stuck in the present for so long. We would love to do some work. So one place where I actually see this might happen is I might actually be going to Afghanistan, and I would love to, work with some of the people over there as well, and look at some Afghan youth, right there on the ground, what's happening on the ground over there. Thank you for that question. Yep. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Let's have Lewis and then Bazir.
Hi, Umar. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you,
I
Louis.
do have a question about as you work with different age of the young people, right? So is there a difference of, say, the techniques you're applying in different groups of people? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Louis, for that question. Thing is, yes, there are. You have to be very culturally sensitive. Plus, what I found over the years, and this is what I said at the very end, I thought that some things simply don't work with people from, let's say, who are from a non-English origin. So, for example, if you're trying to describe a scenario, I've always found that a little problematic because people can't then express themselves properly. Likewise, for many other things, English is not your first language, then it becomes problematic for people to express many other things. That's where I bring in art, that's where we bring in a lot of gaming work. And I found that these techniques then are very useful. Second thing which I've always found is that, if you go in with a very open mind and you look at those people as your friends and you intermingle with them, then you'll hear more authentic voices than come up. And I found this is something which has really worked for me. I mean, I love to do public speaking, but I usually used to be very scared of people when I used to be in front of a crowd. Then somebody once gave me a beautiful advice that, when you go in front of a crowd, think of this crowd as that you are their friend and you're here to help them. That narrative really changed the way I look at, at facilitation. That these are not my clients or these are the people who are going to audit me later or give me an evaluation. These are my friends. I'm here to help them. It's amazing what this thing can do to you, the way it changes, the way you interact with people, the way you can then bring in more humor, the way you can bring more, organic stuff, more organic feelings into your facilitation process. I hope I've addressed, the question, Louis. Thank you. Great. Yes, please. Yeah.
Yes, Umar. So you had your, I guess it seems you were keeping a pulse on the Taliban, I guess, through government contacts and also perhaps through religious leaders. When you think of girls' education, Taliban being strictly against it. So I would very much be, would it be possible for you to open up the Polak game? Because my question is related to that. When we think of Malala Yousafzai, challenging Taliban for girls' education, for her own education, and she was targeted. So, but then, she survived. So, God's will was something else than what the Taliban was desiring. So when you see Malala Yousafzai and other also female role models, what is the role for them? And have you consulted or plan to incorporate them? Thank you.
Wonderful. That's a question which you can't walk away from. So, for example, when I was having this dialogue with the delegation from the Taliban, at the end, they actually asked me this question. I said, all right, Mr. Futurist, you're saying you're a futurist. Give us some suggestions for the future. I was like, that was a question which really hits me. I said, okay, I've never been asked this question. So immediately, two things came to my mind. First thing was, yes, I said yes. I mean, and I asked them in a very, you have to be very diplomatic and in such, situations like, females are half of your population. Sometimes they get sick. So who do you take your mother or sister to when she is sick? So their question was, in the medical field, we actually allow women to study. Is that all right? And what about the rest? They said, eventually we intend to do that, but we have our own way of doing it. I didn't say anything more than that. Now, if you're interested in my second suggestion to them was, maybe you guys could follow the Iranian model. So, for example, the Iranians, for them, the thing is, there is only one Iran in the world. So the Iranians throughout the world, they might have a difference of opinion with the people, with the religious folk who are running the country, but they still come back to Iran, and the people then utilize those, their services, their skills. You could do perhaps something similar as well. There's only one Afghanistan in the world. Afghans throughout the world, they want to come back to Afghanistan. Perhaps if you have a good brain gain program where you can actually facilitate them, call them back, which includes women as well as men, I think you could do a great job. And, that could, they could help in uplifting, the Afghan economy. I hope I've partially addressed your question. I at least don't have a full answer for that, Basir. Thank you.
If I may, then, as we were speaking, so I guess lack of governance, leadership was the missing ingredient, and because they were all interested in combat.
Yep.
So once they had the office, where
now
you would
their
have to put
office,
up
it's a different game
curriculum.
for them. It's a different game for them now because, now they're back in office. That's a very different challenge, and they're trying to do it in a very different way as well. So yeah, it's a very different challenge for them now. Yeah, great. Yeah. But what are you
All right,
guys?
Stephen, would you like to jump in next?
Yeah. Hi, Umar. I question about more the dynamics of what was happening in these groups with these younger sort of people. And so I'm curious about the emotional sort of energy. And so they're producing things. So you're seeing things and you're hearing discussions, so there's futures thinking engaged, but were they excited? Was there an energy like, let's do this? Or was there a hesitance? Like, can I really go here? Like, do I really have agency to dream big or do what I want? What was just kind of your general take in the room and the sessions?
Tremendous amount of energy. Youth is all about energy, guys. I mean, this is across, it doesn't matter if it's just with the Afghan youth, almost every youth group that I've talked about, it's all a matter of channeling of that energy. And that's what we as futurists try to do. One of the things I learned from Sohail and Atala was that one of the things which you should perhaps try to do is bring people in from their depression mode into perhaps saying that perhaps there is something which we can do. That could be one very good outcome which could have. And I'm very happy. I'm very satisfied with my the way I try to facilitate things, bring in that energy. Let's try to channel this energy. And lots of people then when they left, they actually came up and said, "Oh, thank you very much. We're having all these other discussions, but this is about being optimistic about the future, actually thinking about the future. We never actually get time for that. Things like the Pollock game or art and all, they bring in more energy. All right. So in my last workshop, which I did with them, the modified form of the Pollock game, that's like, wow, it hits a raw nerve with people. I don't know if I would love that you guys try that in your facilitation as well. Please do let me know what your experience have been. I found that to, really touch a raw nerve with people and brings it more energy, more authentic, more organic feelings than come in and sentiments come in. Then because they're just looking at their own future, they're looking at the future of somebody whom they really care about and love about. So in this case, for example, the people talking about their kids who are actually playing just outside, this is what I think my kid is going to be. So yeah, so lots of energy in the room. Thank you. That's a great question. Yes. Yes,
All right,
please.
Anisa, please do jump in.
Hey, Umar. My question is, I'm just curious, like, why Afghani youth and what's the connection between the uni and Afghani? And why the topic extraction of mineral? Like, I mean, it seems, I'm sure you have, I'll be interested to know, like, what are the, background to the topic and also the people.
Sure. Just to before I address your question, you said uni and Afghani. I'm sorry, I couldn't understand that question.
The University of
The University of Peshawar.
yes,
Yeah. Okay.
yes.
The thing was, during 2014 to 2017, 4 years. I'm sorry, 2014 to 2018, actually. Yeah. So the University of Peshawar, they have a political science department and they have a summer camp which they conduct at Padagali. So over there, they used to bring in Afghan youth as well for the summer camps. So maybe 12, 15 people selected from different universities in Afghanistan and the political science department students themselves. So graduate students, they used to come together and we used to have these summer camps. And there were a lot of topics they used to discuss about. So for example, things about transboundary, issues, water issues. So lots of issues which we used to talk about. And the Afghan mineral scenario is one thing because that's something which was something which I was very interested, which I'm very fascinated with. I think that's that has the potential to bring a great change or a great disruption in this particular region. In this so for example, Afghanistan right now has some amazing minerals. So rare earth minerals. But Afghanistan is called the Saudi Arabia of lithium. Now, lithium is going to be used in many of these batteries, many of your, renewable energy stuff and all, gizmos and all. It's going to be used there. Lots of other copper is there. And it's right next to China and India, the next superpowers who are resource hungry. So here's a big pie right here. And there are two, competing superpowers right next door who would love to channel, those minerals because it's so easy right there. But there are lots of difficulties. I think if used wisely, this could bring, great change in this region, great change for Afghanistan. And it's useful as because, a strong Afghanistan means also a strong Pakistan, a strong South Asia and a more peaceful South Asia. At the same time, my fear of the future, now this is my future part, which is wild guessing, is that, the thing about Afghanistan is that it's been called the graveyard of superpowers. That's what they call it. So right from the time of Alexander the Great, superpowers and come here and they've been finished. So in the last century, there was the UK, Britain, there's a superpower, then the USSR. You've seen what happened to the USA and their exhibition, their expedition, 20 years. My fear of the future is that we have two new superpowers. They might have a proxy war here. I mean, this is my fear of the future. As a futurist, I fear this. That might be dangerous for the whole region. That's why I'm very worried about it. And also, as I said, that that not many resources or many industries in Afghanistan. Minerals provides a lifeline for many of them, a dream for many of them. That if this is something which could happen, if it's utilized properly, there could be a lot of good things which could be happening in Afghanistan. I hope I've addressed your question, Anisa.
Thank you. That's fascinating. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah. Yes, please.
All right, Peter, please jump in.
Yeah. You're muted, Peter. You're muted. Dr. Peter, you're muted.
I'm trying.
Yeah. There we go.
Oh,
Yes, sir. Yeah.
oh, everybody can do that. Thanks very much, Umar, for sharing all that. Look, you mentioned briefly some issues around climate change.
Yeah.
And I'm interested whether in any of the discussions with the youth you had, there was a clear understanding about what some of the implications are for Afghanistan and Pakistan, you know, in the next 20, 25 years, because my experience has been that sometimes people have created scenarios which there's some things which are given. It's not like everything is open. And I think for climate change, you know, did you have the feeling that they understood what was going to come, but they were still positive and they could see a way through it? I'm interested in that because the experience I've had in a couple other countries is that they actually haven't thought about it as much as you might have thought.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Peter, that is that is, I mean, for example, if just look at Pakistan, to address your question, look at Pakistan. It's the 8th country in the world which is the most climate stricken, and it's most vulnerable to climate change. We've got some amazing, some disastrous things which are happening around in our country. We hear a lot about the word climate change, but not many people shall actually know what climate change is. That is something which changed with me as well. So before COVID, it's like climate change is just one more thing, one more factor or driver which we look at. I had some general idea what climate change was about, but what are its dynamics? I never had a clue about it, but that changed during COVID. And this is what I suggest to my fellow futurists as well. We need to know more about climate change. So what I do now is a lot of work I do is on gaming of climate change. And then I do my foresight work around it. Whether it's a Paula game or whether it's a futures triangle or the scenarios, then I work around that gaming session. So the first place, people actually know what is climate change. And you're spot on. Many people still have no clue about its dynamics. Many people have still no clue how this is hitting us on the head or what the dynamics are. So I think there's a need for us as futurists. I also believe that there is very important that even for youth, we need to have those programs that actually have a better understanding of climate change and its impacts. Now, in my last few meetings which I had with them, there were some aspects about climate change with this. The problem is that these dialogues then get overwhelmed by the other immediate issues of peace, war, chaos, and let's say human rights. They then become the bigger priority topics which people like to discuss. Climate change, unfortunately, then becomes just one more list on that pile. It is discussed, but not with the ferocity with which I think the priority which it should be given. In my discussion with the delegation from the Taliban as well, over there as well, they did mention climate change as one of those big issues they're looking at because it is influencing them around. But one thing which I would give credit to them is that they're very efficient administrators. For example, one of the things when I did ask them, all right, you have this water issue in Kabul, what are you doing about it? And they said, we are now bringing new housing rules for, in Kabul, that you need to have some sort of place where you can harvest, rainwater. You need to have some place here. I mean, they're trying to do what they can, but they also had this, they lamented that they were not invited to the COP. They also want to discuss the issues and about climate change and its mitigation, but nobody's giving them a chance right now. So, yeah, that's what life is. Yep. I hope I've addressed your question, Peter. Great. Thank you. Yep.
Bazir,
Wow.
go ahead.
Thank you. So, Umar, it seems it's such a big challenge. And do you envision the feasibility of a multi-year project, virtual teams of Afghan, Pakistan, and students from all over the world working together on a common problem? I don't know, just an idea. And the second option is just as we have pipelines of oil, water pipeline. A lot of the Gulf countries have extensive expertise, capital on water desalination. So perhaps water desalination plants established on the shores of Pakistan with a pipeline of water, as opposed to oil, because it is going to be an important and precious commodity. Over.
Great. But see, those are great ideas. I mean, if I've learned one thing, during my whole journey of foresight is like, it's always about the paucity of imagination. What you're saying might seem, at some point ridiculous, but that's what we guys do. That's what we guys are for, We're saying ridiculous things, and those things then actually come to reality. So yeah, but why not? I would imagine that now those things are possible, which might have been possible before. There's lots of communities out there. It's a matter of bringing them together as futurists. We It is our duty also. I think that we bring people together. We can do that online. We can do this through the JFS forums or other forums, and yes, bring their ideas together because the future is something which has not yet happened. Let us try to imagine a future which is peaceful. Let's imagine a future where there's much more bounty, but things are more bountiful. We need to imagine that. Yes, so what seems, unrealistic right now might be the destiny of people tomorrow. So yeah, great. I think those are some great ideas, Basir. Why not? Yeah.
Because when I took a national security training, I was told that during the Soviet invasion, as they were pulling out, they have burnt a lot of almond forests and walnut forests that Afghanistan had, which is major cash crop. And I guess focusing on high value cash crops that are good for the cosmetics industry, but just regeneration of forests and greenery or the restoration of the ecosystem. I know these sound big words, but then this is what the country needs as an emergency first course of action. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, great, nice to hear from you. Yep. Wow. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
All right. We have a question from Ilyas. Are you same like last week, Ilyas? Are you maybe not available to jump in on audio? I'll ask I'll read the question off from the chat for you, Umar.
There's also
Climate change.
I think there's also somebody. Miss Sana also is over here. She also wants to ask a question.
Oh yeah, all right, yeah. We'll have Sana jump in, and then yeah, I'll read it. I'll read it for yeah after Sana's question, Ilyas.
Sure.
Sana, please.
Yeah, hi, and thanks for a really an interesting discussion. I pointed here on chat work by my colleagues who are working with marginalized people in Finland, and they use this. They want to bring in the expertise that comes by experience, so it doesn't need to be anything educational or whatever we usually connect with. And I was thinking that how much do you relate to this concept while you're working in Pakistan, Afghanistan, or similar regions? That what kind of potential would there be for these young people, or well, mostly we're talking here today about young people, but to promote the experience and then bring them on the discussion as experts and not just participants of a workshop.
If I've understand you, thank you very much for the question. If I've understood it correctly, we've got a great, demographic. So I'm not sure about the numbers in Afghanistan. For Pakistan, the nearly 60% plus of our population is between the ages of 18 and 23. So we've got a huge demographic which is young and who are very uncertain about their future, because we're always overwhelmed with political issues and issues which make into the headlines for all the wrong reasons. So yes, that population would be very interested. Whenever I work with any youth group, they are interested in imagining a world outside. I mean, this is something which I quite usually look. I don't know who actually came up with this, but I keep telling them that we gaze at the stars while we lie with our feet in the gutters. So very important that you keep gazing at those stars. Otherwise, get out of that gutter. So very important. I think there is a lot of potential. But potential-wise, it's great. And yes, it's important. I always tell people this, that yes, being present in the problems and issues of today is important, but at the same time, some of our energy should be there for a preferred future as well, or looking at the disruptions of tomorrow so that you can start preparing for it today. I think there is tremendous potential for that. I think there'll be a lot of interest in that. Would love to be involved, and would love to involve people from both Pakistan and Afghanistan in that as well. I hope that addresses your question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah. Yes, please. Elias's question, Edward. By the way, guys, I'm
Yeah.
available as long as you guys want to listen to me. I'm available because I believe it's 4 o'clock is the cutoff time, but I'm available and I'm ready to address these questions. I'm fine.
All right. Well, I'll read off the question here from Elias. Climate change dynamics. Where should one start shaping an objective view of what goes on, and what are the dynamics when so many controversial opinions, even fake news, distort reality? And what books, articles, or seminal work can you suggest and act as a base for participants in workshops to start shaping one's own understanding based on evidence and forces that do indeed influence the futures?
Wonderful. That's a great question. You know, for me, how it all changed was I came across a game called the Climate Fresque game. I strongly recommend these fresques to my friends as well. They were created in France. So, and one of my participants over here, Sayaf, that's how I actually met him. I played the climate change game with him and his organization. So it's a very simple way. So one thing is I, present a slide. So if I present a slide, after the fifth slide, everybody will be snoring or maybe looking at WhatsApp or whatever. But if you're playing a game that makes you interactive, you're actually involved and engrossed in that game. Plus, you can then realize this is what it means for me. All right, I'm playing this game. So I love this game. I recommend it to everybody. It's called the Climate Fresque game. If you guys are game, I could actually play this with you guys. We could hold one session. It takes about 3 hours. All right. I'm a facilitator for them, a certified facilitator. I could do that as well. I think that's a very good place to begin. And I've played this game with, like, let me put this in the chat as well. Yeah, that's it. Climate Fresque. Sayaf has just put in Climate Fresque game. And then there are lots of other fresques. For example, there is a digital collage, textiles untangled, circular economy. I'm playing something called the construction collage. So all these games, they are essentially card games, and using cause and effect, you come to know the aspects of sustainability according to that particular topic. I would suggest this could be a very good starting point, and you can use this with different audiences. Now, I played this with, with police officers, NGOs, academics, architects, art and design students. I mean, you name it. They loved it, and then they were able to realize, what does this mean for me? So yeah, sure. Would love that if you play that. So that could be one starting place. And then you move on to the expertise that, okay, what next? Second thing, this thing about fake news and all, that I'm afraid that's something which I have to deal a lot with, even when I'm having these workshops. So very important that we come in, that's where our facilitation skills and maybe some of our knowledge then comes in, that we come to some of these fake news. Otherwise, they're going to just disrupt the whole, your whole audience. And I think there's a great need to counter fake news. I don't have an answer for that, but I think there's a great need to address it. I hope I've addressed your question. Yep.
Okay, yeah, Bazir, go ahead.
I think, Umar, including the maximum possible base, audience, different professions, occupations is most important, because it's going to start the conversation. And they should be worried about it. It is a danger, and whilst they're not responsible in their SWOT analysis for climate, but it is going to affect their operations. So their, how effective they are combating crime, and their staff's performance. So it is very much relevant, and yeah. So thank you for doing that, and it's also a great tip.
Thank you. That's great. Great. Wow.
Is there any more questions?
All right. Yeah. Does anyone else have anything to add, or questions or comments?
Yeah. If not, I have one more question for you, Umar.
Great,
So you have
yeah,
done
sure.
you have done so many workshops. So what are some of the interesting reflections that you might have that you can share with us?
With the Afghan youth?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, lots of reflections, but one thing which I said was, if you walk into a workshop, look at everybody as your friend. That changes the dynamic, that relaxes you up a bit. You can speak more organically and freely. That's something which I've always worked. Humor works. Humor is great, but you need to be very careful. Second thing which I've thought is that interaction with the audiences. Again, you have to be very careful. And in some audiences, you have to be very careful about the, hierarchy, that sometimes you're addressing somebody who's higher in a place. You have to be very, very, careful that who you're sometimes addressing, or maybe cross questioning. I found that works. Parlor game is great. I've always found it to be amazing. It's amazing of the amount of people I worked with, the different permutations that I've worked with. That's really works. And I think we need to mishmash as well. As futurists, one thing which I would want is, guys, there's something which worries me about future studies, and that is that we now have a lot of these guides that you can do this way, causal analysis this way, the futures triangle this way, and all. Remember, at the end of the day, all these guides exist to, open up our imagination, not to close it. That for me is one great fear of the future, that these guides, these tools, can just become a way of just one more, if I might use a strong word, actually subjugation. If this is where we want to think about, let's use these tools to do this. That for me is a serious fear of the future. I see that happening sometimes. I'd say we use all these tools to open up the dialogue space. There'll be things which we like, things which we do not like, and they'll express them. Things which are, universally perhaps acceptable, but they bring into the audience, brings it up. We need to, talk about them as well. Those silent voices need to be heard as well. That's, I think, a very important part of any futurist work. I hope I've addressed your question, Anisa. Dr. Peter wants to ask a question. Yep, please. Yes, Dr. Peter.
Yeah, no, it's actually just a comment. I quickly had a look at the climate fresque, and it does use the IPCC reports as a base for a lot of the knowledge.
Yeah.
There's been, as you're probably aware, from COP28, the conclusions which are in the IPCC report are actually more optimistic than a lot of the scientists would have agreed with. And that was because the pressure that came on to actually get the wording agreed because of the way the IPCC works. So I've been encouraging people to also look at other leading Earth system scientists about what they also think, because people we've got an author here in Australia who was on the IPCC, and she's actually left her job to now advocate because the coal and gas industry pushed very hard for the wording in the IPCC report. The scientists actually wanted to have wording which said cease all future coal and gas, don't open anything else. But the wording which is in the IPCC report says transition.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
So I've actually run some scenarios with people who are not all that familiar, but I've forced them to go and have a read of a few bits and pieces and said, okay, your base scenario is 2 degrees. Now go and work on, that's a given. We want your we want, whatever scenarios you're going to work on. I don't care whether they're, data's archetypes or whatever. But the given is 2 degrees. Now work out what your transformation is, what your marginal changes, etc. And people can, because they do have what you've talked about, this positive energy, and they can still see ways through it. But it's a more realistic a way of actually approaching it. That's just a personal view. Back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Peter. Thank you for your feedback. Appreciate it. Thank you.